Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for this Elephant We Don't See Diversity Dialogue. My name is Kyla Hannington, and I am the Public Outreach and Engagement Division Manager with the Prince George's County Office of Human Rights. Tonight's Diversity Dialogue is the last one for this calendar year, 2023, and it is the fourth year now that we've been holding this conversation in partnership with the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. So many of you have joined us for most or even all of these conversations, and we are so grateful to all of you. Thank you for being with us on this journey. And on that point, I do want to say some of you tuned in last month, and we had to, unfortunately, we weren't able to do last month due to some illness. But we appreciate those of you who tuned in and even reached out to ask what was going on. And we're happy to be back with you tonight. We're delighted to be talking tonight about Tommy Orange's There. This beautiful book is Maryland Humanities One Maryland One Book Selection for this year. And tonight we're delighted because we have a few copies to give away thanks to the Prince George's County Memorial Library System and Maryland Humanities. So for those of you joining us, as the evening progresses, make sure you send an email to our office. I'm going to share our email address soon. Let us know you're watching, include your name and mailing address, and we're going to send a copy out as supplies allow. So first come, first served in terms of getting those books out to you. We're really excited about that. With me tonight from the Office of Human Rights are the Executive Director, Renee Battlebrooks, and Assistant Director, Jose Villegas. And they have been doing this with me for the last year or so since Michelle Hamill left the library system. So glad to have Renee and Jose here again. Thank you so much for being with me again. And joining us from the library is Deborah Capone, who is a librarian 3 at the Bladensburg branch. Welcome, all of you. Thank you so much for being here. I thought to get us going tonight, I would introduce the book by actually reading the back. So I'm hoping that people watching have heard of this, especially as it's One Maryland, One book. It's an extraordinary book, came out in 2018, debut novel, won all the things as it should have. So here's a little introduction from the back. Tommy Orange's, sorry, let me try and do this. Let me try and get my reading voice on. Tommy Orange's wondrous and shattering novel follows 12 characters from Native communities, all traveling to the big Oakland powwow, all connected to one another in ways they may not yet realize. Among them is Jackie Redfeather, newly sober and trying to make it back to the family she left behind. Denny Oxenday, pulling his life together after his uncle's death and working at the powwow to honor his memory. 14-year-old Orville, coming to perform a traditional dance for the very first time. Together, this chorus of voices tells of the plight of the urban Native American, grappling with a complex and painful history, with an inheritance of beauty and spirituality, with communion and sacrifice and heroism. Hailed as an instant classic, There is at once poignant and unflinching, utterly contemporary, and truly unforgettable. So it's pretty great. And I hope those of you who haven't read it yet, make sure you reach out to us. I'm going to give you our information and we will get a copy to you. All right. So does anybody want to jump in and let us know what you thought?
I can jump in and start us going. I first read There probably about a year ago. So it was still fresh in my, well, as fresh as anything in my memory is anymore, which sometimes not so good. But there's a lot to talk about in this book from my perspective. And that, in this case, that's a good thing, because sometimes that means that I didn't think it was well done. But in this case, I really liked the book, and I think it demonstrates why it is so important that we hear from all perspectives and voices, not just so that others can see themselves in literature that's broadly available to everyone, but also for those. This is a story about a specific place and varied people. It's Native people in Oakland, California, and it's the stories of 12 people. So there are a lot of characters with their own stories and their own circle of communities. But different from, I'm not a Native person, I don't live in Oakland, and yet the humanity of that you see in this book, it just demonstrates to me what's great about literature. And this is a fiction book, which it seems like many of the books that we've featured, or that you all have brought to us in these diversity dialogues, a lot of them have been nonfiction. This one is a fiction book, which is a little bit different, but it helps demonstrate what I'm talking about as far as representing all voices in what's available to us at the library and outside of the library.
Yeah, that's one of the things. I think as Neil Gaiman says, that novels are empathy builders, right? I think that's and I think that does that. This book is one of those examples. Like, when we were planning the diversity dialogue for this year and a little bit last year too, we were like, let's bring in these other ways of looking at the world, and it's not just having nonfiction books, but bringing in memoirs or novels, and I think I agree that this book does a great job of really bringing you into deeply into a world like through that empathetic lens.
Yeah, one of the things I have to kind of admit that my preference of books, sometimes I prefer nonfiction than fiction. But in this case, even though that is a fiction, is a novel, I think the characters that he put forward and discusses and describe their lives, it kind of give, even though it's a fiction, it give a sense of what reality is. Some people are going on, they going through, I guess, in the community in this country, because it talks about how government treated their native back in the 1800s, and how this is now affecting these characters. It talks about the struggle, economic, social struggle that they're going through, the familiar, the struggle with families in addiction and all of that. So even though it's fiction, is fictional book, the characters are kind of showing things that we can relate in reality. It's not something that you can see and think like, this is not happening, it is. So it's I think that's one of the things that I liked about the book, that is it kind of shows in even for a person like me that don't like those fictional books, I think it caught my attention. It's just reading those characters and what they were going through.
Well,
I tell you, when I began to read the book, what I was struck by, a couple of things. One, as an African-American woman, Black woman, reading this, I was struck by histories written by those that did the vanquishing, and how as a Black woman, the fight is occurring right now to have truth in history when it comes to slavery. But I realized that our Native American brothers and sisters aren't even where we are. And it was so powerful, that we know nothing about the history. It has been completely erased. And then a substitute that is this sort of, false tropes and narratives. And we have a great deal of work to do to help to uncover and to elevate and to make this something that this is our history collectively, just like slavery is our history collectively, right? And it's okay to say that part of our history is genocide. We're not saying that we're okay with that, but we have to acknowledge that that is part of who we are, and that's where the healing begins, and that's how we sort of are able to move on. And so when I started reading, I thought, my goodness, we're fighting from 1619 onwards, but there's so much before that is completely erased. But for some laws that are on the books with treaties, but anyway, Deborah, go ahead. You were shaking your head.
Oh no! I did for those who have not yet read the book. It begins with this sort of very brief history of the United States after outsiders, or what is now the United States after outsiders come in. And I wanted to hear what, I think you all agree that that's a very important beginning to the book. It sounds like it's very brief, but very intense. It's intense and it's important. And I did appreciate that survey, that very brief survey, was there to set the stage, sort of, and let us know what we don't know. Some of us are all too familiar with. Mm-hmm.
I have to say that really impacted me. So a little bit about my background. I'm from Canada. My undergraduate degree is in specifically Canadian history and First Nation studies. And so I would say in general terms, in sweeping general terms, I would say that I'm not unfamiliar with settler colonialism and the genocidal history as it relates to Indigenous people. And I would have said in both Canada and the United States. Like, I would not have said that I felt, of course, nobody can know everything. And I'm certainly very, very, very far away from that. But I would have told you that I felt that I had the broad brushstrokes. I would have told you that. Emphasis on would have. Because as I was reading this, I was just like, I have never heard of these things. And admittedly, I'm not from the United States. Like, I will say that my degree is specifically looking at a different nation, a colonial nation. But like, I was actually, as you know, I pulled up this part because I wanted to talk about, like, I had never heard of John Chivington. And so after I read so this is mentioned in the prologue, one of the people Deborah's talking about in this kind of like broad, quick history, this mention of John Chivington. And I Googled, because I was like, who's John like, who is this? And for what it's worth, even though I'm from Canada, I did go to high school. I was in high school from 10th through 12th grade in the United States. And I actually did take an American history course. The first time I went to university, I tried to go to university many times, so I like to drop out. But eventually I've got a degree. But I did take an American history course. And I can tell you that at my education, at no way did I know about this. And for those of you at home who have not, I can't even advise you to Google Don. I mean, I can't even advise Googling it because it's really so awful. And how I could live here as long as I have and have the background that I have and have absolutely no awareness of this was actually really shocking to me. I don't know about Jose and Renee, if this was new to you or you'd been familiar with this.
No, it was new. And that was sort of my point, that I think that perhaps each minority group who feels oppressed thinks we're the only ones in this, we're the only ones that have suffered. But what this book shows is no. As bad as our African-American slavery history is, we know more, and I feel like we have a bigger voice. We have allyship more so than I think our American Indian brothers and sisters. And so I was struck, like, how can we elevate? How can we become better allies? Because at least generally we as Americans have some notion of our slave history, but maybe not, because it's, even as we speak, being rewritten somewhat about how it was, good for slaves and whatever, right? But as bad as that is, that's what this is what it showed me, that we know nothing about the history of our other brothers and sisters, the other marginalized group. Really, yeah.
No, I was just going to kind of say a little bit what you were saying, Ms. Barbara, is that even in college, when I took U.S. history, or even high school, I think it's very specific, the chapter of any books that deal with Native America. And I know one of the things that is briefly touched is the Trail of Tears,
Mm-hmm.
that movement from east to west, but then it quickly go to something else, right? So, I mean, it's very brief, the historical thing of what is touched in American history, beside the other things, the one who has written the history books afterwards, but yeah, so it's very brief.
Yeah, I agree with what I think it was Deborah and Kyla said. Like it really hit me hard, those first, that survey. And that was just the tip of the iceberg, but just what he was able to accomplish in a paragraph, just it was food for thought for a while. Yeah, it's deep. It is deep.
Yeah. Yeah. I was really interested in the way one of the characters embodies or expresses or lives with fetal alcohol syndrome, which the character describes, calls it the drome, and talks about his experience and like what his gifts are. And I felt like that was just such a very different narrative than I had ever seen about fetal alcohol syndrome. And of course there's the famous Michael Doris book, and we don't have to unpack Michael Doris right now, but there's a famous Michael Doris book, the Broken Cord. I was going to forget the name there for a second, which really, I think, probably whenever that came out in the 90s, did two things. One is it really raised a lot of awareness about fetal alcohol syndrome, but I think it also linked for a lot of people fetal alcohol syndrome and Indigenous people together in the public consciousness. But I think that for me, reading this character and the richness of this character was the first time that I had seen fetal alcohol syndrome in literature, in any or nonfiction, in any representation that was, I thought, really full. And I did, just a richness and moving away from this kind of singular negative characterization.
And he becomes a hero by the end of the book. So it's I did enjoy his being in his head, and it reminded me of, there isn't very much that talks about the strengths of that. You think of the characters with similar disabilities, cognitive disabilities, and they aren't as active a role usually. And well, I'm not that well read, but the few that I think of, you think of Faulkner, or you think of they get to I don't know, in Faulkner, I guess.
I think of Benji.
Yeah. So.
Benji's my favorite character in The Sound of the Fury, but I know what you mean. It's not necessarily really rich.
Yeah. At least he gets a voice, I guess, which is more just like Tony in this book.
No.
So am I hearing both of you say that in this book that the character doesn't fit the stereotype of how it is portrayed in other ways, but there's a richness to it,
like full humanity.
Yeah,
full humanity. And my experience, and I've limited experience, so I'm not saying this is all a representation of because I certainly have not read everything, but my experience has been this very one note, tragic, disabled being versus a fully realized human being. And I thought that this book did such a great job of, and as at least for me, as I read it, it was like, well, of course, a person with fetal alcohol syndrome would be a fully real, of course. But yet, having not seen that or experienced that, I still, as a reader, found myself being like, not surprised, but grateful and recognizing I hadn't seen that before.
Well, kind of like what you did, Carl. I did a little bit of Googling. Just to kind of see what was out there. Sometimes I think you and I would go down rabbit holes when we read things, like, and so I kind of looked up sort of the health and what that situation is. And I came across sort of, some synopses about sort of laws that were passed that were aimed very particularly at providing health. And, we have our zip code series that, I thought, wow, this really falls within that. But how the urban movement, migration, has affected that, how the federal government is able to carry out their obligation or not really carry out their obligation. and that I think in 1990, only 37 or 38% of our Native American brothers and sisters lived in urban settings. And as of like last year, it was 70%.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just, I'm thinking sort of globally and the character and prevention and treatment and all of the things that are vital and are still being missed. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting, Miss Battlebrooks. I didn't.
It's Renee. It's Renee. I tried to get Jose.
Yeah, because I didn't really think about that. I was thinking more which is still part of how we often think of Indigenous people here as Native people. Oh, well, that's part of history, and they're not. You don't think about these, as Tommy Orange in the book is very clear. Like we are here. We are here in cities. We are here on small places that we've been conscripted to, and people have certain ideas, this romantic image or whatever of what Native Americans are, but we are what we are, and there's that includes being in Oakland, California. Lots and lots of people are in cities, including and we're still Native people, but we're here in urban areas. But which I'm going to have to think about the point you just made too, because that's certainly important, that I totally missed while reading the book.
No, it's just a rabbit hole I went down.
But that definitely touches, and it's part of that.
Well, if we can go down a rabbit hole, I will just recommend a book. I think I've recommended this book before, actually during the diversity dialogue. I think when we were talking about Lee Miracle's I Am Woman, which we did for Women's History Month a couple of years ago, and she passed away recently, but a Indigenous woman from Canada. There's a great book, and Renee, as you were talking, it made me think of this book as we talk about the federal government's obligations, such as they are, and such as they are met or not. And it's a great book called The Inconvenient Indian by Thomas King. And it really provides, and I'm putting this in the chat for people who are watching, who are interested in knowing about this. It will infuriate you. It will make you really, really angry. But it also provides, I think, a very, very good overview of government, colonial government relations, both in the United States and Canada, which are different, towards and over top of and with Indigenous people. So I just put that in the chat, and I'm recommending that people who are interested in this, they check out Thomas King's The Inconvenient. I can go down a rabbit hole on this subject for a very long time, so I'll try and go back to Tommy Orange. But there's really, I mean, the thing is, it's so multi-layered, and I think the idea of the urban Indian, and we've had this in Canada where there was a judge who this is going back, but it was like not that long ago, like in the 90s, said something like, if you drive a pickup truck and eat pizza, you're not Native, and was doing this as it relates to treaty rights, and people were like, what? But this is something that I think you said, and I think one of the things I appreciated about the book was talking about, there's a part, I'll see if I can find it, it's in the very beginning, where he's talking about Oakland and being in the space of the city and the land, and how because where is it? Let me see if I can find it. Okay, here we go. I got it. Okay. Can I do a little dramatic reading?
Please.
This is from the prologue. Okay, I'm going to do a dramatic reading. Urban Indians were the generation born in the city. We've been moving for a long time, but the land moves with you like memory. An urban Indian belongs to the city, and city belongs to the earth. Everything here is formed in relation to every other living and non-living thing from the earth. All are relations. The process that brings anything to its current form, chemical, synthetic, technological, or otherwise, doesn't make the product not a product of the living earth. Buildings, freeways, cars, are these not of the earth? Were they shipped in from Mars, the moon? Is it because they're processed, manufactured, or that we handle them? Are we so different? Were we at one time not something else entirely? Homo sapiens, single-celled organisms, space dust, unidentifiable pre-bang quantum theory? Cities form in the same way as galaxies. Urban Indians feel at home walking in the shadow of a downtown building. We came to know the downtown Oakland skyline better than we did any sacred mountain range, the redwoods and the Oakland hills better than any other deep wild forest. We know the sound of the freeway better than we do rivers, the howl of distant trains better than the wolf howls. We know the smell of gas and freshly wet concrete and burned rubber better than we do the smell of cedar or sage or even fry bread, which isn't traditional. Like reservations aren't traditional, but nothing is original. Everything comes from something that came before, which was once nothing. Everything is new and doomed. We ride buses, trains, and cars across, over, and under concrete plains. Being Indian has never been about returning to the land. The land is everywhere or nowhere. I just thought that was like, and that sets up that sets it all up.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, there's such richness in each, like something that you can think about for a long time, just one little vignette like that, or one little paragraph.
Sorry, I'm being mauled.
And that gets back to the title of the book itself, I think, the there, and how that quote, I think he talked, the Dean, Oxen Dean, he's one of my favorite characters. There are so many. I was very appreciative of the cast of characters at the front of the book to reintroduce them, because I don't think that was in the book that I first read, and I had a hard time keeping track. But he talks about how people just use the quote, "There's no there," totally misattributing it to, I just thought it was important because it was the title of the book, but I'll do a little dramatic reading too, not as
Yay.
I mean, no one's really from here, right? Rob says, and Rob is a character that Dean meets while he's applying he's trying to get grant money to do his project, and he calls him some kind of hipster or something, I think. And what? You know what I mean. I do know what you mean, Dean says. You know what Gertrude Stein said about Oakland, Rob says. Dean shakes his head, no, but actually knows, actually Googled quotes about Oakland when researching for his project. He knows exactly what the guy is about to say. There's no there, he says in a kind of whisper with this goofy open-mouthed smile Dean wants to punch. Dean wants to tell him he'd looked up the quote in its original context, in her Everybody's Biography, and found that she was talking about how the place where she'd grown up in Oakland had changed so much, that so much development had happened there, that the there of her childhood, the there was gone. There was no there anymore. Dean wants to tell him it's what happened to the native people. He wants to explain that they're not the same, that Dean is native, born and raised in Oakland, from Oakland. Rob probably didn't look any further into the quote because he'd gotten what he wanted from it. He probably used that quote at dinner parties and made other people like him feel good about taking over neighborhoods they wouldn't have had the guts to drive through 10 years ago. And I'm not sure that's exactly connected to, but in my mind, it is connected to what Kyla was talking about, is this, the land is there, it's not, you are of it. And I thought that was a good explanation for his title, and I loved it after I read it.
Nice. I wanted to ask you, Deborah, you know, I think you said that Oxen Dean was like one of your favorite characters. For those who haven't read it, could you like why or what? Yeah, what about it?
Well, telling stories is just a theme and a topic throughout the book, but Dean is he is looking for stories of Native people in Oakland to finish a project that his uncle, who has since deceased, started, and he just wants people to tell their story. And I think that's what Tommy Orange wants to do as well. He did give them some of the same. I think both the character and the author are enrolled in the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes and lived in Oakland, so there's that little bit. But he he's out there to get stories. He knows they're important. He doesn't want to tell his own story. He wants others to tell their stories. And I was interested, and this is probably getting off topic and into my literature nerd, but that this was his uncle's project, not his originally. And I wondered why the author made that choice, as if this is something that I didn't know if he had some sort of inspiration for his work as well, like the uncle like Dean's uncle in the book here. But yeah.
So you're wondering why that particular twist?
Yeah, if that was an important, I think it is important. I have my, I don't know why, but
Right.
there's probably some reason. It's important to tell the stories. Not everybody realizes that, and so somebody has to keep that going, like he is for his uncle.
Nice.
So I got a couple of things. So for one is for people watching, you've been seeing I put in the chat just a reminder that about our giveaway, which is really we were given some books. Gratefully, our office was given we gratefully received some books from Maryland Humanities and Prince George's County Memorial Library System. So thank you to both of those organizations. We are able to do this giveaway. So please send us an email. I have put it on the screen a couple times. ohrstaff@co.pg.md.us. I'll put it up again because that was probably fast. And give us your name and address, and we'll do first come, first serve. We just have a couple books to give away, but we would love to give one to you. So please send us an email so we can do that. The other thing I was thinking of, which I've probably now forgotten. Oh, I want to talk about something, which is, so in Canada, in Northern Canada, there is a Indigenous band called the Dene, Dene. So when I read this the whole time through, I was thinking of the Dene, and I was reading this name as Dene, as you probably heard in my opening remarks, said Dene. And then I was listening to you, Deborah, say Dean, and I was thinking and which I'm not correcting, it probably is Dean, but I was thinking about how it made me think of how what we read, we bring into what we know. That I heard actually John Irving, the Canadian American author John Irving, World According to Garp, if you're into that kind of thing, so Cider House Rules, I can name a few other books. He once said that he didn't believe in book groups because no two people could possibly experience a book the same way, because you bring into it everything that you brought in. And in fact, if you read the same book twice, you would be a different reader each time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, I love this idea of just the name, like how as readers we are bringing, and I think this is why one of the things I love about the diversity dialogue, and the point of the diversity dialogue, I think really is looking at the fact that we as readers experience things in different ways, and we bring our story, like Renee talked about, what's as an African American woman reading this book, what was her, she had certain experiences. And so I don't know if we want to kind of talk about that, and we can talk generally, or we can relate to the book itself, but just how we are so shaped by our own histories when we approach any kind of work of literature, or Jose, nonfiction. I think that this is also true for nonfiction.
Yeah, that's interesting, just that you said that about the name, because being from the United States and also living in Phoenix for a long time and working with some tribal librarians, the Dene is what I was wondering if there was any, because that of course is a name, a native name. And so interesting that you were talking about the names, but yes, I think that's a good reason to be in a book club, though, as opposed to not be in a book club, because you do get sparked by other people's, sometimes shocked, sometimes, it's by how other people, what they focus on and what they get out of the book. I once had a discussion with a person. I wasn't in a book club for very long, but I did enjoy it. And we were talking about, she was trying to define literature in a certain way. And for me, it was something totally different. It's like, yeah, literature, anybody can get anything out of anything they're reading. So I don't really have this close definition for that particular word. And so, yeah, we have to chop things up in ways that we understand it. And we do that automatically until somebody tells us, hey, wait, there's more than one way to look at this. So
one thing that I kind of wanted to mention, probably this is just changing the whole thing, the conversation. I think, Kyla, what you mentioned in terms of how you look from your perspective, like, I mean, from my Latino perspective, reading this book, one of the things that I kind of noticed too in some of the characters is one is the acceptance of using the word, the Indian word, right? Of how people identify. Another thing that I noticed is that even though some of the people were searching for their identity, but trying to find out, what tribe they were and all that. Even in that case, some of the people were like, other people would say racial slurs of them, but then they were, I think that they were Mexican, and so that was kind of one of the things that that even though we some are aware of that, the number of people, the Native American here in this country, depending on what region of the United States you're located, like Western, Northwest, not Northwest, Northwest over there in Washington area, that just by looking at the person's physical characteristic, you just go and go with the assumption of even thinking about whether they are like Native Americans, but immediately go and they will call Mexicans, and so that's one of the things that kind of got in terms of how they were searching for their identity, but then they were in more than that, they were also being called racial slurs that were not part of their identity. So I thought that was kind of interesting to me in these characters.
And I guess not a whole lot has changed, right? Because we still do it. If you look at sort of after 9/11, some of the violence perpetrated against folks that were not any shape, way, form from the Middle East, but that's what they thought they were. With our Sikh community and some of the horrific. I guess it just highlights, Jose, the frailty of human beings and how we are in our mind feeble. We're feeble-minded if we choose to not look beyond or to educate ourselves or to learn, which is why this diversity dialogue that Kyla and Michelle, hatched all those years ago is so wonderful, because it allows us to explore things that we probably wouldn't in our busy lives. Like, it's not, I don't think, on purpose, but this forces us to really stop and think and talk with each other, right? So, back to your question, Kyla, like, look, we have a diverse group here talking about something that is probably outside all of our spheres in an intimate way, right? We may have 30,000 footer, right? So I think that, I agree with what you said. I agree with what the author that you quoted, that reading things that we, by definition, you bring with you your history and your worldviews and your whatever's going on in your life. And you're right, you could read the same thing and something else is going on, and it completely, things that you didn't see before all of a sudden strike you differently. So it's such a wonderful and non-threatening way to really embrace or learn even uncomfortable things. So I don't know if I answered the question.
So, we have a comment actually that I'd like to share. It's a question comment from Susan Roberts. So first of all, Susan, it's so great to see you with us again. Susan is one of those people who has been with us since the before times when we could meet in person, and has just been an absolute wonderful participant in so many of our joint programs. So it's great to have you here tonight, Susan. Susan says, I found the book complicated, not easy to follow sometimes. Did anyone else experience this? So first of all, if you are watching, feel free to jump into the chat and join that conversation in the chat. But for those of us who are here, how was it for you in terms of following the narrative of the book?
I think I would second that. I would agree with that. because one of the things is, some of the characters, he talk about this character, and there's something happening in that character that you wonder, okay, what happened with this? And then you later on you find out, like for example, one of the example I could give is dealing with Blue, right? Jackie Red Feather was young, and they were like an Alcatraz, and she got pregnant. Then yes, she gave up the kid in I think adoption. Yeah, adoption. And then later on, like at the end of the book, is Blue it's presented, and Blue was the child that was adopted by a white family, and then trying to search for her mom. So it's following the story. It's like, okay, there's something here, and then you find some of the information later on, but then you have to read, and then this it go back and forth. They jump from. So yes, I think I agree with that.
Yeah. And I think maybe I'll just maybe that's why what Deborah said at the beginning, like when she read it a couple of years ago, it didn't have the cast of characters. So I think, Susan, to your point, maybe there was some acknowledgement that, okay, maybe we need to put this in a place where people can flip back and forth, and, sort of a way to organize kind of what Jose's saying as well. Yeah.
So I'm not sitting at my desk tonight, and the cat is very excited to have me in a different spot in the house. So I apologize for our interloper tonight.
Yeah. Did anybody else want to tackle Susan's question?
I agree with both Jose and Renee. It's not linear. It's not. You're jumping from different decades. And there are 12 characters with their own characters surrounding each of them. So it is a lot to keep track of.
This made me actually, in terms of that kind of the way in which it's composed, it reminded me of another Thomas King book. Can I recommend another Thomas King book, which is Green Grass, Running Water? And I'll put a link for that in the chat in just a second, which also is a book that sort of challenges a linear, if you're somebody who's more comfortable reading in a very linear perspective, it would be challenging. But that's also part of the fun of it, is to to be able to kind of like open your parameters of what your expectations. I'll grab that link and put it in the chat.
Is it kind of like the classic, was it Pulp Fiction, where like some of those movies until at the very end, none of it makes sense. Like the pieces are, I don't know if that's an analogy, but yeah, it doesn't, the picture is very unclear. You think you have everything, but no, this is, after, and then all of a sudden it's retrospect, and all, yeah. It does make it challenging.
And I don't know if the commenter, Miss Roberts, I think it was, and I'm not sure that, I know that was, part of the puzzle the author was putting together. And for me, that was not my favorite part of the book. My favorite part of the book was getting to know these characters. And I kind of wanted to ask what people thought of the way this ends and the structure of the story, which it's cool. I mean, it's cool, but it definitely wasn't my favorite part of the book. And sometimes it's good to put a puzzle together just to know that you can. It doesn't mean that I enjoy it all the time, but yeah.
Can I answer your question with a question, Deborah, really quick? I want to ask you what you're talking about. That do you feel, and Susan, if you're still with us, and anyone else listening, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Do you think that the way that it's written, in terms of the kind of the non-linear fashion, I hear you say it's not your favorite part of the book. Do you think what would the story have been like had it been told in a different way? So like maybe more a way that was more familiar to you?
I think, I don't know if I'm talking a lot, but I think it's absolutely a brilliant way to tell the story, the storyline of this book. I do. I'm just not sure I like the storyline as much as I like the people that were introduced.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's a great differentiation. Okay. What about you, Jose? Do you have a thought on that? Like, if it could have been written like,
Honestly,
what
I
would it have done to
wouldn't.
this?
I don't know what would be the main thing that would glue everything together in a linear fashion. I mean, because like Deborah said, I think it's just the character that tells you what's going on. I know that most of the characters he presented the way that they were struggling, and struggling just to in a personal level and to so I don't know how I would have organized it differently, because the point, I guess, the main focus of the focus is, like Deborah said, it's just pretty much the characters' lives and what they're going through and how they handle a thing, or how I lack expertise on that question, Kyla.
Well, I was just thinking, like, it is about getting to know. It is about getting to know these different voices. And is there a way? I mean, I'm not suggesting. I mean, this is a very good book. I'm not. My question isn't to suggest it should be told a different way. I was just thinking about what would the impact to the story be, or to the ways in which these characters resonated for us. If it would it have felt as? And I think you've answered that, really, both of you, like that. This is the way it had to be told, because these voices we wouldn't have been able to get these voices and that resonate with us so fully if it had been told in a different manner. We have another question actually from one of our viewers, Andrea Lopez, who is wondering, what was your biggest takeaway from this story? I'll start, actually, if that's okay. And I'm going to say, I think we started kind of at the beginning with this, but
Is that the Andrea that we know?
This may in fact be an Andrea who works for the Office of Human Rights. It could be, who wants to know what our biggest takeaway was. And I think for me, it's really what I started with, which is like, I'm just continually reminded of my ignorance. But I think that is true of the diversity dialogue in general, and it is one of the things that I love about it. It is such an opportunity for me to learn over and over and over again how little I know, how much there is to learn, and to be truly granted an opportunity to learn outside of myself. And I think this was a really reminder of that for me, that I know nothing.
I think for me, it's how common that the struggle is in different cultures, not necessarily just one, but it's how different cultures can relate to some of the struggles that they're going through, the assimilation, the identity, the social economics that deal with everything around the struggle with family. So the struggle with alcoholism, the struggle with drugs. So it's how all of that is related. All of us are related to have some relation to or experience some of those stuff that other people go through. So so it's not like you can just think, oh, I don't go through that, so I can't relate to people, right? I mean, somehow all of us go through some of the things that we are able to relate, interconnect each other with other ethnic groups, other community.
Yeah, I think a little of what both of you said are all important concepts. I was also thinking about the question you asked just prior to that, and I don't really have an answer, but I wonder if it was written differently, whether it will or would resonate differently. And as Susan said, the last comment you put up, sort of maybe the thinking wouldn't be as deep, because it challenges, right? It's not right. You have to actually think and put the pieces together, is what I'm hearing, which does challenge you to think differently. You can't just kind of, you know how some books you're just following along, you've already solved it, but it's sort of that space where it's calm, it's nothingness except for this, right? It's a different form of escape. You don't have to actually concentrate, and it's soothing. Does that make sense? Versus like chat, like every paragraph or chapter challenges.
Yeah.
Your way.
And he doesn't stop that challenge at the end. There is no like nice denouement to give you. It's challenging all the way, and you don't get any relief, really, in that way, which is great in my opinion. I think this takeaway from this book. Great fiction. I think we're gonna make a convert of Jose. He's gonna start reading some more fiction. But it's great at revealing real truths, and I think it emphasized for me how important having more and more stories and diverse stories. For what that's I'm not explaining. I don't define diverse very well, but really helps you understand the world better. It's because you can, it's humanity or nature or whatever that is, there is a theme that we all relate to in all of these stories, no matter how different they are from our own personal experiences. Octavio, it would not be a very like Octavio is one of the characters in here. He's a drug dealer, and we get to know him too, and not on the outside from anybody's perspective in the book, the nicest guy that you know from the outside, but we get to know him too, and he and his humanity, and great example of the importance of seeing different perspectives represented. Learning about that. Yeah.
Now, one thing that, even though that, I think Deborah discussed or Deborah mentions how there's many characters, right? There's 12, right? The characters. But I think one of the things that you can see throughout each character is a connection to the powwow thing, right? To that location, to that celebration. And I think somewhere in the book that I don't remember page, I will not recite the specific page like Kyla and Deborah. It's I think it is discuss what the powwow is, so what's the reason, right? And in terms of the celebration, and so it's you see that all these characters they have a common relation is the powwow and what the powwow means for that culture, right? Because it's a place where you go and celebrate, sing, song, and some other stuff. But it's interesting to see that even though there's many character, one thing it's common and throughout.
Well, I think we're almost about time. Let me just ask before I close, does anybody have a closing thought for us before I jump into taking us out of here?
Yes, I would just say something. Thank you, Kyla. Thank you for forcibly volunteering me for this. It's been a pleasure to participate in this. I know this is the last event. I'm sad, not really, but thank you for the invite. Just wanted to say that.
The event isn't. This is just it for this calendar year. Jose's tendered his resignation. We have not we have not accepted it yet. But but in all seriousness, I want to echo what Jose said, Kyla, about sort of putting this, diversity dialogue together. And as we're coming to the end of this calendar year, it's not over. But we have pivoted and ebbed and flowed, from how it started. But I appreciate what you've done. And thank you, Jose, for joining the journey. We didn't want Kyla to have to do it by herself. And thank you, Deborah. And thank you for all of your colleagues at the library that have volunteered to join us each session so that we have at least 4 people and 4 different perspectives, because I think, I learn from everyone each time. So it's good for me. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Deborah, for joining us and being with us. I am going to just take a minute. I do want to say a couple things here as we get to the end of of this tonight. So it is the end of our 4th year, because it was 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. And as Jose and Deborah talked about, we started this really, Michelle and I, really looking at some really foundational texts to do with racism, specifically anti-Black racism and white supremacy. And we actually, on our website, which you can get to by going to civilrights.mypgc.us. Let's see if I can say that any faster. civilrights.mypgc.us. We actually have a page up there now that has all the diversity dialogue books on it by year. So for those of you who've been following or want to know more about what we've read and maybe some of the choices that we made, they're all up there. And I really invite you to go and check out some of those books and reach out to us at the office if you have any questions. I also want to just thank again Jose and Renee, and also the library for this partnership. And Deborah, you being here tonight, but all of your colleagues, as Renee said, we've had people, since Michelle departed for her wonderful new position, and we're sorry to see her go, but happy for her, of course. Different people from the library have stepped up, and it's been a really great partnership. I think that the diversity dialogue provides an opportunity for all of us to kind of stretch ourselves a little bit. Hopefully, I mean, that's the goal. And for me personally, it's been really great. I do want to let people know who are watching. We have a couple other events coming up tomorrow night. We have another one with our friend. Actually, they're all with our friends at the library coming up this week. So tomorrow night, our friends at the library and us, and we are hosting a wonderful discussion, part of our Voting, Democracy, and Action series. It is about the recent Supreme Court decisions. So it's the Supreme Court decisions and democracy. What is their impact on democracy? So please join us. That is also going to be on YouTube or Facebook, the library at PGCMLS. You can find it on our website as well. But if you go to YouTube and go to PGCMLS, you can find that tomorrow night at 7:00. And then on Thursday, we are debuting a very exciting new program. It's actually midday. So for those of you who are free midday, 2 to 3 p.m., it's on Thursday, but it'll also be on YouTube forever and ever and ever. And it's called Social Justice in Community. And we are going to be having these conversations with academic scholars, thinkers, students, writers from the University of Maryland, talking about their research, what they're doing, and how does it impact us in a meaningful way in community that actually makes it practical. It's not just like ivory tower over here. It's like, what are we researching? What are we thinking? What are we learning about? And what does it mean to you? And how can it be effective out in the community? So that's actually going to be on every Thursday, starting in the end of January all the way through May. But we are debuting 3 special guests. And the first one in the fall to kind of kick this off. Our first one is on Thursday when we are having Dr. Chris Marsh join us to talk about singlehood as a human right. So I also really invite you to check that out. Again, you can go to YouTube and go to the library's YouTube channel, PGCMLS. You can also find it on our webpage, again, civilrights.mypgc.us. Sorry about that. And also you can go to the library at pgcmls.info/events. These are the longest closing remarks I have ever done. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in and being with us. And again, Renee, Deborah, and Jose, thanks very much for being with me tonight. Good night, everybody.